Here we are. Hello, everyone. How are we? Everyone doing well? Okay, a little tired? Yeah, the cake coma, I'm telling you. It's a sugar crash. It happens. All right, brand new talk today, security in practice, tools and techniques. Brand new. Finished it 15 minutes ago. All right? This talk is dedicated to those who recognize that we are all accountable for promoting security. During this talk, I share a bunch of different ideas of how we as technologists can have better security practices. Folks, I am the Nerdstein. I am formerly the Associate Director of Engineering at Civic Actions, currently the VP of Engineering at Hook 42. My first day was yesterday. Security, thank you. Hey, no heckling. Security has always been a passion of mine. It is a very deep, very broad area of study. It always changes. It's very diverse. And I hope today I get to share just a couple thoughts on how I might help some folks get towards their security journey and traverse that a little bit. I am very grateful to be here. I had a great time here last year, so I'm very honored. Thank you all for coming. I want to start on a slightly different note. A few days ago, there was a shooting in a school at Parkland. It's only about, 2 hours away from here, approximately. 17 innocent lives were lost. Think about like this room. 17 of you gone. While this talk is about security and we're talking about Drupal and technical stuff, it's devastating to me to imagine that our children in this world have to question their own safety and their own security. I truly hope that we find effective ways to solve these problems before it gets any worse. Those are my kids. All right. An introduction. Where do we start with security? It only takes one mistake, and nothing else you ever do will matter. No matter how hard you work or how smart you become, you will always be known for that one poor choice. Security is very hard. New vulnerabilities come up every single day. There are countless attacks that can happen. A hacker can, exploit even one really, really small thing and gradually work their entire way through every system in your network, super subvertly, very quietly, very slowly, very methodically. And they can do all of that without you having even a clue that it is doing it. One humbling fact that always resonates with me: one mistake can be one line of code. It can be one configuration line of your server, one message on Slack. Yikes. This is nothing but the finest of lines between being secure and being insecure. Imagine that. Given a choice between dancing pigs and securities, users will pick dancing pigs every single time. Every time, okay? Classic. Classic. Where does that leave us? Some of us in the room have the responsibility or the accountability of the security of a system, of a Drupal site, of a set of users that you're serving. What happens when your users take no responsibility for their security? What do? They are relying on other people to make sure things are just secure enough for them so they don't need to be burdened. Not only is it nearly impossible to be secure, But now you have to drag people kicking and screaming. Yeah, that's even more fun. So let's have a little discussion today about how we can help that situation out. Here's a brief outline of what we're going to talk about. We're going to start by securing you. What can you do? We're going to look at team ops, operations of a working team doing Drupal development or whatever, continuous learning, and then we're going to look at some emerging technology. Did I misspell it? Yeah, I did. Brand new talk, my friend. Brand new talk. I love you too, Lee. All right, securing you. I believe that a good security practice actually begins with every single person in this room, regardless of what you control or what you don't control. It's all about you, baby. Not quite. There is much more to that, but you get the point. You need to be a good example. Maybe people will follow your lead. You have a real opportunity to demonstrate and establish good security practices for your company and for those that you serve. Let's take a look at maybe some of the people in the room, what you might control. There's a chance that some of you at least would resonate with some of this. You may have Drupal administrative access to your Drupal site, right? Full keys of the kingdom. You could have some access to push or commit code and move that up through an environment or server. And even some of you probably have root access or extremely highly privileged access to the servers themselves. Does this resonate with any of you? Okay, just making sure. Everything is awesome then, right? And that's the burning fire behind you. If a hacker were to get access to even one of those things, you would be screwed. You'd be done. Imagine the burning fire stemming from the server room, or all your stakeholders putting tickets in or emailing your support. Oh, God, who knows? You'll be restoring things from backup feverishly. You'll be changing passwords every minute you can get. You'll have downtime. Your reputation might suffer. You could even have a lawsuit. I mean, that's really how crazy these things can get. And let's just face it, people will start to have a significant amount of doubt in you. So let's get into some practices that are actually going to help you out. First, password managers. Okay. In security, most people hate security, right? It forces them to do things that are harder or more cumbersome, because if something's easy, right, a hacker is going to exploit it easily. That's just how it goes. So security is often about making things harder on people, and that kind of sucks, but it might be a necessity. Password managers are one of those rare combinations of things that promote usability and security at the same exact time. Password managers can generate super long, really difficult passwords, and they store them persistently for you. So you don't need to write it down. That's the worst thing, right? If someone breaks into your house and they see your sticky notes right on your desk, you're done. Passwords can be shared, amongst teams and administered to people that come and go on a team very easily. So you could say, hey, you're leaving Civic Actions, so I'm going to revoke these passwords from you. I love you too. The only risk is the trust that you put into the service itself, right? So if you pay for a service, you actually are trusting them to make sure that their practices are secure, and so are millions of other people. I guess that could be the bigger, reward, the bigger the risk, whatever, right? But at the same time, they're doing a pretty reasonable job. So what are some examples? Well, you could use something like LastPass or 1Password. And really, they're very affordable. I think you can get them for like $20 a year or something like that. And they often have things like browser plugins and their own personal vaults, apps on your phones, and they support everything, passwords, keys, you name it. The browser plugin is actually really perfect when you're doing Drupal development on Drupal sites, because you can really quickly store it and just use the browser plugin to log in and go for it. Awesome. All right, secured channels. So in security, people can snoop on each other, right? It's a famous thing about, going to a hotel or getting on Wi-Fi on a plane. Things are just so terribly insecure. People will very easily snoop on what you're doing, okay? So using secured channels whenever you possibly can is a really easy way to do that. Use of SSH for all server administration. SSH keys from your local system helps with the usability a little bit, so you don't have to remember passwords or do any of that. But all of that stuff should be done not only for you, for your administration, but also all of your remote scripting and any kind of secure communications to the servers themselves. SCP is an extension of SSH that allows you to really easily move files between servers or your local system and a server. Super easy, super quick, and gets the job done. Another low-hanging fruit for a secured channel, if you're doing a Drupal site, please install HTTPS, okay? Just do it. I mean, it's so easy. When you have Let's Encrypt now that's totally free, you don't even have to pay a cent to do it. This coming from the guy whose personal website doesn't have HTTPS yet. I have other things to do, okay? But please, configure it into your servers, and especially it's so important if you're collecting any data. If you're doing any data collection on your site, like, give your users that happy little lock on the screen so they're okay with it. One thing to avoid would be FTP. Pardon? Hey. Oh yeah, that's right. Chrome is getting a lot more aggressive about, blocking sites that are insecure, like mine. Yeah. What's that? I think so, yeah. It was very recent, I believe, yeah. Do as I say, not as I do. All right. So FTP was like the old school way that I'm going to move files between servers, right? Super slow, super cumbersome. You have to use passwords in the clear text. I mean, all these things were just gross, right? People were hacking into FTP constantly. Like, it was so easy. So disable that altogether if you can. If you have a host that supports FTP, just turn it off. Like, save yourself the hassle. And if you're using an insecure network, like you're on a plane or you're on at the coffee shop and their Wi-Fi is wide open without a password, turn on a VPN client, okay? Really, really stupid simple. Something like PIA. You can download it, like 20 bucks for the service. It has like geographic benefits as well. The IPs shift, everything like that. But it's so easy for people to steal your data if you're using an open network like that. It doesn't even matter if you're doing really, good things otherwise. It's a low-hanging fruit. So use a VPN if you're outside of your home. Cool. Numero dos. Team operations. There are many, 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 many opportunities that if your team is working in the exact same way and doing things consistently in a good, secure practice, it's going to really help the cause, right? Okay, so the first thing, some of these things are just best practices, by the way, but they influence security. So if this seems like, oh, this isn't related to security, it kind of is. So the development workflow is a huge one. How you work is just as important as the work itself. You can't just focus on the best code that you've ever written if you're pushing it up in clear text to a server. Classic example. So how you're going to be working is really key to being secure and doing things right. So a development workflow is really the perfect opportunity for you to combine all of the best practices that you learned in security and development, best practices, everything, all together with the tools and the people into something that's extremely harmonious and easy and predictable. For a team to be effective, there needs to be this level of consistency, right? And it goes the whole way in every aspect of the work. It goes from how the backlogs are created in the work that you're collecting and tracking and organizing to how your quality assurance occurs, and then how that code gets integrated in the code repositories and moves through the environments that you release. These things are critical. A good workflow can ensure that teams support one another, deliver very high quality work, and guess what? Be secure. Period. So let's take a look at kind of like a very high level what sort of happens here, right? Someone gets assigned a ticket like, hey, install views on this server. There's some configuration change, code change, some change element that ends up needing to be done. Those changes are submitted for review feedback happens, and there's a level of iteration until something gets to a point that it's of high quality, right? So let's take a look at this. Changes are often proposed, in a code repository as a pull request that can be reviewed by someone else on your team. So what makes for a good pull request? There's a lot of things. First and foremost, and this directly relates to security, 100%. The smaller that your change element is, the easier it is for you to review, for you to scrutinize it, and really, really, really dig into it, right? If someone submits to you a 3,000 line pull request and you want to spend 2 weeks reviewing it, that might be the only way you could achieve something that's of high quality, right? Small is good. And guess what? If you have to submit something that's big, do it incrementally. Put a WIP, work in progress tag on your pull request and review that thing in small and iterative increments. Just do it. It's way easier, and the quality of that review ends up being infinitely higher. The security concept that's related here is what's called isolation. Larger changes cannot be easily isolated. If you deploy a large change and all hell breaks loose, it is way harder to rip that change out. Another good pull request tip, and this is just, my opinion, is making sure that the code is well organized, well commented, it's using all of the best conventions, PHP-CS, right? All these things in the Drupal community that we like to promote. And that it limits complexity, and I'll talk about that in a second. Why would I be preaching about using PHP-CS in a security talk? Guess what? If you have to go in and clean up something, you better make sure it's done the same way that everything else is done, right? You don't want any surprises. You don't want stuff that has 9 tabs in and has 18 new lines and has all this white space at the end of stuff. No, I don't want to deal with that. If I have to go in really quickly and fix something because it's been hacked, I want to get in there and I want it to look the exact same as everyone else's stuff, no questions asked. All right, so let's talk about complexity. Everyone in this room has an opportunity to be pragmatic. I believe that is the #1 thing that I look for anytime that I'm hiring someone is pragmatism. I want to see people have good judgment about what they do. How do you do that inside of your code if you're doing a good pull request? Well, you better make sure it's logically organized. I want to make sure that your code is not a 4,000 line .module file. No, won't jive with me. You need to minimize complexity as much as you possibly can. That is critical. And guess what? Limiting complexity means that you are actually lowering your risk as something that you need to secure. If something is more complex, it's way harder to secure it, right? Go in and try to make a change on something if you get hacked. You'll be like, oh no, it's horrible. Yeah, I've been there. All right, so you submit this really awesome pull request, and you're the person on the other end of the spectrum that actually wants to review it. First and foremost, this is just the mentor in me, I suppose, but really, this is an opportunity for you as a person to teach the other person some best practices, give them some knowledge, help them learn from you, right? Swart right there, awesome code reviewer, one of the best I've ever seen. So once a pull request is made, how do you actually review it? What do you do? These present great opportunities to teach these best practices, and guess what? Security can be right there at the table when you are reviewing code. No questions asked. The highest number of security flaws exist in one-off custom code. I have some news for you, Drupal folks. You have this wonderful thing called Drupal.org, where countless millions of people in the community have pushed billions of lines of code that solve countless different problems, and we call them contributed modules. Contributed modules are a great opportunity that you can minimize the custom code that you need to do. So guess what? If you have a choice of implementing a contributed module that's been scrutinized by the rest of the community, that's been reviewed, that people have submitted patches to, so on and so on, using those projects are always going to be way more secure, way more polished, way better than writing something yourself. Eugh. Drupal is not very great at enforcing conventions. It's not wonderful at making sure you're developing things properly, especially Drupal 7, just for the record. It doesn't even really force you to use its framework, right? You kind of can use it if you want, and that's not really great sometimes. But because of this, people are capable of doing really wild things. I mean, stuff that's like totally insane. SQL queries and templates, evaluating unsanitized user input. You could do it easily. You could call the raw PHP commands, grab stuff from anywhere you want, and go with it. Yee. I would strongly recommend that you use the framework. Do it right. Jonathan, somewhere in the room here, had asked a good question when he was reviewing my slides earlier. And he said, what happens if you're a team of one? How do you get code review? How do you do things if you're working by yourself? We in the community are always willing to help. I've never not found that to be the case. There are countless people spend thousands of hours giving back their time, their energy, their knowledge freely and openly. Hop on Drupal Slack, get on IRC, file an issue to a queue, ask for help. If you need help reviewing code, I guarantee you'll find someone. It's easy. Cool. Properly use code repositories. This is really instrumental. Code repositories are probably the most critical DevOps tool that you have in your stack. It is like the foundation of the house as far as I'm concerned. It's the source of truth for your code. It stores all your branches. It has every tag that correspond to your different releases or changes on the site. It stores an entire log of every change that ever occurs. That's pretty crazy. All environments and all the infrastructure that you use should be driven through the code repo. Don't be copying it. Don't make, crazy changes directly on prod that don't go through the code repo. That's just, you're asking for trouble. In security, there's a concept known as mediation. So mediation occurs based on specific events, when events occur, in systems, right? In Drupal, the most canonical, representation of events is driven through hooks. So we have these hooks, and they fire off specific events, and those are mediation opportunities. I could drop some code inside of a hook, and I could say, hey, check and make sure the user entered cat. And they do it, right? Otherwise, it would fail. That's a mediation opportunity with an event. And you can ensure that the correct things occur. Hi. Oh, we had a little visitor. So all of this stuff can occur within the application. I have kids. I love them, by the way. You don't have to do anything, honestly. Code repositories are really another tool that actually present that same type of opportunity, if properly implemented. So let's take a look at this. This image is courtesy of the GitFlow team, and this is on LeanHub, if you see it. It just is too good not to reuse, so I hope they don't sue me. But this image really does a very good job of capturing these different events that might occur that you could look at mediating. And these events really are opportunities. It could include something as simple as like, hey, I've pushed a commit. That's an event, right? Or, oh, I've pushed a commit and I'm ready to merge it into a branch. That's an event. Or, even better, I'm ready to cut a release and I'm going to add a new tag. These are all events that you can wire into your development workflow. So mediation can occur very commonly throughout your continuous integration stack, and scripts can drive all of this stuff that can happen at any one of these events. Cool. So DevOps. Let's take a look at that for a moment. It's another big thing for teams. DevOps is a mindset. I think people mistake it. I think they think it's like a goal or an objective. Like, oh, give me DevOps. Like, it's the same as like, give me security, right? Sure. Where do you sign, right? DevOps is a mindset. It's actually about creating the tools, creating the environment, creating the process and the collaboration that can help teams improve. That's the motivation of it, right? And there's a lot of tools out there that can help to do that as well, but security is a major thing that can be a part of your DevOps mindset. It can really help a team to evolve using security right at the forefront of all of it. And it's way better than documentation. I mean, really, how many people routinely read documentation? Okay. But not everyone does. Thank you. DevOps is a way of actually doing active enforcement, right? Instead of having a static document that people need to read and keep up to date, DevOps gives you the ability to say, okay, we're going to automate these things, and they're going to happen automatically, and we're going to have this enforced. It gives teams, I believe this mindset actually provides teams a way to learn. Why? Because if you learn something, you enhance your DevOps scripts, or your automation, or your DevOps stack, or your pipeline. You can do anything like that. If you learn of a new way to check your code, you want to run a new scan, or do a new kind of cool thing, you just simply update your scripts. It's a great way to be present to things that you learn so that you're not solving the same problems over and over again. Automate all the things, baby. All of it. All of it. As much as you can. And that mindset is really good because the less manual stuff that you have in your stack, the better. It's less error prone, right? We care about that with security. We don't want things that are error prone. Humans make mistakes. If I try to type, watch out. Horrible typer. Automation is a great way to promote predictability. The more you automate, the more that you're able to address a problem once, set it and forget it, and you don't have to cross that bridge again. So many tools exist in the space where automation is capable of helping what you're trying to do, and every person's circumstances are different. So it might not be for you, but things like Ansible, you could even write PHP scripts that do things, Bash scripts, Fabric, Drush, Git, tons of stuff. There's like, you know, I could go on and on. I could do a presentation just on automation. I probably have. So what's a simple example? Well, okay, suppose you want to automate your releases. You could do that really easily by writing a commit hook or a tag creation that runs a Drush script that pulls the code into the repo, runs composer updates, runs the database updates, and then clears the cache. That's pretty simple, right? And you don't have to worry about doing that ever again. And then if you find that something you need later and you want to add another step, yeah, you just do it. You just add it. Dunzo. All right, that image courtesy of Atlassian. They have some really good marketing material. Props to them. So what are some pro tips for looking at DevOps? One of the things I think that's really critical is making sure that you're giving the engineers on your team as immediate feedback as you possibly can. And that is based on things like complexity or certain conventions. You can run PHP CS or the, what's the cyclomatic complexity scanner? I forget the name of it. Yes, yeah, I think that is. Yeah, MD, right? You can go and scan these things to basically analyze your code and say like, okay, are we following best practice here? Well, we are, good, all right. Then we need to change it. You need to be considering tools that you can integrate inside of your DevOps pipeline and make things easier and more sophisticated and consistent. This can affect everything that you do, from release management, giving feedback mechanisms about scanning sites and doing things like that, or giving feedback on code before it gets released, or even, what's really crazy, is like the creation of new environments, which we will talk about in a few moments. And for Drupal specifically, like there is a lot of useful things. We just talked about a few, but you should also consider, periodically running backups, making sure that you're tracking things off-site and you could very easily restore. Actually performing a backup, like I think people don't think that's like, oh, why would I ever do that? Well, if it goes haywire and all your backup scripts are broken and you didn't test it, it's not very useful, is it? Yeah. So all these things are really critical, and there are things I think that actually you want to do immediate, like you want to give people very immediate feedback, and then there's other things that you can do that are more like periodic. Like so say like a scan takes 6 hours to run. You don't want to wait for a pull request to be scanned for 6 hours. That feedback loop is way too long. So you can do things periodically, like you could run PA11Y for accessibility. That's a good one. Or like Zap. Zap is an open source penetration tester that you can scan code, say, bi-weekly or weekly, and get a whole report of things that you could look at. Hopefully it's not very long for your sake. But we did talk about code repos, right? And all the different opportunities that could exist if you push a commit or push a branch or anything like that. Travis CI and Circle CI are amazing for code repo stuff, doing immediate feedback loops to engineers and developers and doing things. And that can happen on every single event. And that could be where you run PHPCS or look at other really immediate things to get feedback. But the key, I think, is looking beyond just the code, right? You need to look at automating all the things, everything that you can, right? So look at your environment. Look at opportunities to automate your environment through things like Docker and Kubernetes, Ansible. You have to have parity between what you're doing on your system and the environments that you're shipping things up to. If you don't have that parity, you're always going to be surprised by stuff. So don't have those differences. Continuous delivery. This is like the rage right now, okay? If you want like the hotness from this slide deck, it is probably this stuff. And I'm by no means any expert in this, but I'm very passionate about this stuff, and I believe this is definitely where it's at. So continuous delivery is about extending the known philosophies of having servers and this automation and all of that occurs, but then bridging it with really rapid releases and very frequent changes, and it actually is really good for security because you're minimizing the changes, right? You want really rapid releases. I love that. And all of this really has been made popular because of cloud computing. All the cloud computing APIs and everything that exists now makes the rapid provisioning of environments and instances and infrastructure like totally painless. So what does that actually replace? It replaces the idea that you have servers that are these big monolithic things that never can change or evolve. I've got a dev server and a staging server and a prod server. They shall not be touched. We shall push code to dev. We shall push code to staging. That is how life will be. Nope. If you can provision servers rapidly and you have all this awesome automation, you can be building and swapping out instances within seconds, right? And it can happen all on the fly for every single change that you make. You could push one line of code change difference and have an environment running like that. In security, it's a huge win. If the servers can be rapidly spun up and destroyed and provisioned and everything like that, guess what? It makes the target that a hacker is trying to hit a moving target. They're not going to have something that's going to be around for years and years and years at a time that they can slowly work their way in and get their fingers in and noodle around and screw with stuff. And the use of automation can really, really be beneficial for helping people recover from attacks. Okay? It's going to be great. So I love continuous delivery. It is where it's at. I think some people in the community have already seen some of these types of features. So things like on-demand environments with some of the hosting platforms allow small incremental changes to be tested. You could push code from a branch and get an environment up, and this stuff is already kind of in the space as we know it, right? But the beautiful thing about it is it allows things to be QA'd pretty instantaneously in small increments and then pushed directly to prod. So the historical view of all this, just to kind of summarize what we just talked about, is we can now avoid, based on continuous delivery, we can avoid large cumbersome releases. We can avoid bigger changes that causes bigger catastrophic failures in our releases, deployments, and so on and so on. Because you have to bear in mind that failure itself erodes trust. That's the key part of this, right? Trust is a big thing in security. Who do you trust? Do you trust the system? If you put in your username and your password, do you trust it, right? And the more that you erode trust, the worse it's going to be, period. And so avoiding these things, if you're delivering early and delivering often, you're spinning up environments on the fly, you're doing all these really cool things, you're making it a lot easier to be nimble and to adjust to the changing landscape. And by the way, every time you spin up a new environment, all your learning that you've done, all the changes that you've made, that you've figured out over time, are all a part of that because you've automated it. Every single thing. So the legacy view here, as I mentioned, I already stole my thunder on this. Bad Adam. First time giving this talk, bad Adam. We have dev, stage, and prod, right? The conventional view is we move stuff down from prod. It's our content master. It goes down through staging and development. But we have code, right? And the code goes from dev the whole way up to production. That's the legacy view, right? Integration testing happens on dev, acceptance testing happens on staging, and then we give it a good old release. The problem really is that you can't really work in parallel, right? What happens when someone has a change and then 5 minutes later another person on your team has a change? Well, guess what? You're bundling a release. That release gets bundled. It gets pushed to dev. Now you've got 2 changes on dev. Whoa, wait. The next person on your team just finished another ticket. Oh, crap. All right. Well, let's do this again. All right. We got to have another one. We're going to crank that in. We're going to move it in. It is constantly a moving environment, and you can only do release bundles inside of this type of environment. All right? Not very effective. Continuous delivery is actually about pipelines, right? Every change, every increment has its own pipeline. And this image was done by Jitendra Jha for credit. So instead of just having dev, stage, and prod, we're removing the concept of static environments exclusively in terms of pipelines. Every single change goes through Git, goes through your source control system. It goes in to create a build server right on the fly, then gets tested, then gets incremented, goes into integration. Once it passes and gets your green light, it goes to a static acceptance testing server, just like your clients want, and then it gets shipped to prod. All of that happens in one line, one increment. No dev, stage, prod here. Inevitably, the code does end up getting merged in with the master branch and all these other things, and then goes in as a release. So it has some similarities, but really it does evolve it a lot more based on incremental changes. And that can significantly damage the amount of changes that can occur and the things you need to secure and all of that stuff. Make sense? Cool. Pardon? How does it happen? Well, I mean, I might have to answer that later, just based on time, but it happens inside of your hosting platform and your use of Git and your team's workflows. So each one of these arrows relies on a degree of automation to occur to make that happen. Okay. Sanitizing data. So if you have a production system and you're collecting a bunch of PII about, people, or there's a lot of security related information in there, if you're pulling that information down to your local system, guess what? Now your local system has private data on it. There are ways that you can sanitize things before you export a database or pull down files, and Drush actually has a tool called SQL Sanitize. It gives you really easy out-of-the-box options to eliminate things like email addresses and passwords, just as a small example. But it actually can be really easily extended for any type of data that's on your system. You could hook into it, and any export that would occur would then be sanitized and cleaned up. So you don't have to worry about making sure that any other environment besides one system has secure data. which is really, really critical and important. Two-factor auth. So security is all about promoting ideas about what you have, what you know, or what you are. That's like the trifecta. Like if you ever hear, a classical security engineer talk about that, that's what they always talk about. Authentication leverages this concept, right? I mean, it is a classic thing that everyone's familiar with. Most tools now that are in the space have two-factor authentication. You need to use it. Like, take advantage of the fact that there's two-factor auth. Most hosting environments have it. GitHub has it. GitLab has it. Drupal applications can have it. Thank you, Jonathan. And Drupal.org now has two-factor authentication as well, right? Use TFA. Use it often. Use it as prevalently as you possibly can. It is so cheap and easy to do. You can install apps on your phone for the second factors, right? You could have Google Authenticator on your phone. You could get a text message, which I don't strongly recommend. It's not very secure. Yeah, yeah. Why is that insecure? I don't understand. But some of the best ones, though, are also YubiKeys. YubiKeys are the bomb, right? They are so easy. You put them in your wallet and you just plug it in when you need it. It's so stupid simple, right? But yeah, definitely avoid avoid the text message. Just say it. All right, that was section 2 on team ops. We're making good progress. We got a little bit left to go, but we're going to keep going. Continuous learning. All right. There are only 2 types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that don't know that they've been hacked. That's what it is, okay? So who's the author of this? Robert Mueller. That name should sound familiar in this political landscape. What kinds of zero-day vulnerabilities might come up that you might be aware of? Drupal core and Drupal contrib, any JavaScript library that's pulled into your system, any third-party or upstream code dependency, systems and servers, DevOps tools. All of these things are subjected to vulnerabilities, and I guarantee you they're in your stack. Guaranteed. All of them, right? This is crazy. This is the attack surface of your Drupal application at a high level. Some of them might even have even more. You could have Memcache or Varnish installed or a CDN. All these things are, it's crazy. You have to make sure all of it's secured and updated. One of the most practical things that you can do is perform the updates. Just do them on a regular basis. Every single Wednesday, go in and check things out on Drupal.org and check the feed, right? It's super simple. You could subscribe via email. You could wire it into Slack and have your really annoying boss nag you about security updates being posted every Wednesday. These are yes. These are things that happen. I can't automate myself. Actually, no. You know what? Slack reminders now. Yeah, okay. I'm going to automate myself out of work. All right. So what can you do? Drupal.org has all these different security feeds. Feeds are good because they're data. You could wire them into something. It's easy. But the feeds don't cover the third-party tools. That's one thing you have to be careful of. So these feeds can be very easily subscribed to. You could get emails, like I said. Slack notifications are awesome and wonderful. GitHub. Okay, GitHub's doing some awesome stuff. They have a thing called a dependency graph right now. If your project lives on GitHub, you could check out their dependency graph, and it can automatically scan and look for security updates in all your dependent libraries. Damn, that's easy. It just gets a job done, right? Sensio Labs is trying to do something very similar with an application that they're called like security advisory checking or something. And the cool thing about the security advisory checker is it has an API. And that can be found at security.sensiolabs.org/API. Check it out. SIEM systems. In security, data is everything. It is the #1 thing that drives all of this. The entire realm of auditing and analysis can be crucial for performing forensics if you get hacked. You need the right sensors in your system, you need to collect the right data, and you need to make sure that you are analyzing that data properly. It makes no sense in an enterprise system for an individual to sit there and scan through a log. You can't do that. You'll have billions of records. That's not feasible. How are you going to find what you need? And those logs come from everything. They come from Drupal, they come from the server, they come from the CDN, and they come from every part of your system generating data. Yeah. So a SIEM system tries to automate and analyze these things for you, which is kind of cool. So it will process all of that data that's being generated. It'll summarize it in really cool and clean ways and data visualizations. And really the goal of it is to try to give you analytical information to help you be more secure. What is happening on your systems? Having a view like this is much more powerful than scanning a log. Tools like Elk, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, or Splunk, all of these tools are trying to do these types of things. And they can have tons of different rules and logic that's applied, looking for SQL injection attacks or IPs that are hammering your server. If you have 70% of your traffic coming from one IP address, chances are they're trying to break in. Just block it, right? These are really critical things that you need to be dangerous at doing this. Alerts and monitoring. This is not an area I'm like super familiar with, but it's been critical. Like if you have issues in your environments, it's good to be proactive about them. And then if it goes down, you don't really want to get an email from the people that you're serving like, hey, your site went down. You should know about it, right? So if you get the right sensors in place and they look for specific conditions, that's really good. So the conditions could be things like breakage on a site, like, oh, this thing's throwing a 404 error now, or this page isn't rendering properly. It could be a full outright outage. You definitely want to know about that. It could even be proactive where you could look for an 85% threshold of utilization, right? If my server ever gets to this point, I want to know about it, right? Because then you're going to boost up the servers, going to give them more memory, going to give them more space, whatever the problem is. Or you might even want to know about the frequency of errors in your log. You could have a threshold that says, if I've surpassed 500 error messages, I want to know about that too. So this can be a really good way of avoiding downtime, and keeping your team informed about what's going on in the servers is really, really dangerous. Tools like Pingdom and OpsGenie are all examples that you can explore to do these things very easily. They're very robust. All right, last section, I promise. I think I'm running out of time. I might be. Sorry, Kyle. This will be quick, I promise. So machine learning. Machine learning is probably the most intriguing space in the security world right now, but it's also the most dangerous. It presents a real opportunity to use all these cool big data tools and draw insights across millions and millions of records and data and activities and all these things. And it's great, right? Except it's kind of a little bit of an invasion of privacy if it's not done thoughtfully. Drupal sites are often protected by a CDN, and CDNs are the biggest and most classic example of machine learning going on right now in the Drupal world. It can double as a web application firewall. So a CDN can sit between your web servers and the outside world and basically scan and mediate all of the traffic based on millions and millions of other transactions that the same CDN service has processed for everybody else in the world to know what is trying to needs to be secured on your site, right? So if I have this type of a request coming in, chances are it's going to get blocked. That's the benefit of using a CDN as a web application firewall. Neil Drum, who works for the Drupal Association, gave a presentation in Jersey where the association is integrating Fastly and Perimeter X. Perimeter X is an analysis tool that's built in that can integrate with Fastly and automatically ban IPs, automatically have roles and triggers that can block really crappy activities, SQL injections, all of that stuff. So it's a pretty nice tool. It's pretty cool. That presentation was great. Blockchain is the next one. So security and integrity are very much related, but they are different topics. Often good security practices promote good data integrity, and blockchain is no different. We in the Drupal community have a major opportunity, I believe, to make sure that our data is good. And blockchain uses things like hashing and cryptography and time metrics to generate these hashes and change records that you can go back and validate that your data is what you expect it to be. Bless you. And so if your data is right, it can actually be verified and you know that your data is intact, right? So I haven't seen a ton of solutions yet come up in the Drupal community, but I do feel like that's an opportunity with emerging technology. Managing secrets. I have a sandbox project right now called Vault. It's built on HashiCorp's Vault system, which is a secret manager. And these things can be incredibly useful for storing things like API keys, storing passwords even, right? Anything that's like kind of sensitive in your system, you could offload that to a third-party system that just manages secrets. That is kind of cool. Happy to sprint on that tomorrow if anybody is curious or interested. And we talked about the trifecta, right? Who you are, what you have, who, you know, all these things. The something you are is the major area right now that I think that we are at a crossroads in the whole technology landscape. All these new phones and fridges and all these crazy devices are using things like facial recognition and fingerprint scanning and voice recognition. This is kind of scary, folks. So, as Jonathan put it perfectly when we were talking earlier, biometrics are passwords that you can't change. What happens if you get hacked and someone has your fingerprint? Oh, man, I don't even want to think about it. These are all like really, really exciting new pioneers, but they will all skirt the lines of security, of trust, of ethics, and privacy. You all need to be aware of that. I want to thank you all very much. This has been a great camp. Thank you, thank you.